So those Christians who had developed the DNA of Christ in 2015 were prepared for the two great end time tests that should follow since 2015, the LGBT test and the mRNA vaccination. Or they had to be resilient to it, right? The 171 years long HSL had also prepared for patience. Remember that very well, it's so important. Patience that would become another characteristic of the saints. We come to that. Patience. Can you imagine what we believed in 2010 when we saw the full deciphered HSL in front of us that said the end is 2015? The high Sabbath list ends in 2015. And now put yourself in our shoes in 2010. And we see this list ends with the end of wilderness wandering in 2015. And then we have the Orion clock that ends also in 2015. What would you have believed on our place? You have a clock of God ending, the sanctuary clock, the Orion clock ending in 2015, and you have the DNA of Christ ending in 2015. I bet you would have believed the same what we believed, that Jesus would come. That the prophecy that the DNA of Christ or the people of Christ would be in unison, in complete harmony in that year already, because the DNA was already painted completely. And the clock of God had ended. You would have believed exactly the same thing. Jesus must come. But Miller studied one verse of the Bible. No, he studied the whole Bible, but one verse brought him to understand that the judgment had begun in 1844. That was the Daniel 8:14 verse. The 2,300 evenings and mornings. They ended in 1844. And what did he believe? Oh, Jesus comes. As we believed it, with seeing these things. When he saw Daniel 8:14 fulfilled in 1844, he believed Jesus would come. And we saw the HSL ending and we saw the Orion clock ending, we believed Jesus would come. Could Jesus have come? That's another question. Could Jesus have come in the time of Miller? They were convinced, but he did not. Indeed, Jesus did not come, but the judgment of the dead began. When the judgment of the dead had ended and the judgment of the living had begun, we believed Jesus would come. But what had begun? Really? The judgment of the living. That's the similarities. And there was the test of not giving up belief and hope in the learned things since 2010. 5 years, 6 years, 6 years we had studied. And we should not give up that belief even if Jesus would not come. When we saw the double stop codon in 2010-11, I saw it in 10, the church saw it in 11, we believed that this double stop was the proof for the second coming, latest in 2016. A year later. So what happened instead? I told you many times now, the judgment of the living had begun. What was happening in the first year after the HSL had ended? And you all know what happened. You should at least know. God called us through dreams to keep the tabernacle feasts in tents. Yes, we should not be judged because of any feast day or feasts. And the feasts have been abolished. But there's a verse of Ellen White that I like very much. She said, it would be good for God's people to have the tabernacles feast, to be reminded on the wilderness wandering. Because the Jews, they are living in straw huts or whatever it is, yeah, outside for 7 days, outside, even 8 days with the Shemini Atzeret, outside of their dwellings, no, of their houses. And they have a very near contact through that to nature. They're reminded on the wilderness wandering, on the in commodities at that time. No? In a very nice spiritual feast. So we were called to go uphill. Tabernacles for us is almost summer, late spring. That is, we had 40 degrees up there, this hill. 40 degrees where we put the tents. And we were living there, not in our houses. On the third day of this feast, and we believed Jesus would come, as I told you now. We thought that is tabernacles must fulfill, the autumn feasts must fulfill. So Jesus comes in the Yom Kippur or in the tabernacles or in Shemini Atzeret, which is called the last great day. We believed that. So we were sure that Jesus would rapture us up there and rapture us from the great heat. On the third day of this feast, John Scottram, I woke up from the voice of the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit asked me in audible voice to do a certain prayer. And the prayer order of the Holy Spirit was that we as church should ask Jesus not to come yet in 2016. Because the 144,000 had not been completely sealed. And many would get lost if he would already make an end to this world in that year. Later, years and years later, we found that this is written in the Bible, Revelation 7. And 4 angels wanted to make an end of the world, but then came an angel from the east and said, hold the wrath of God until the sealing of the 144,000 has been really finished. Later, we saw that indeed Jupiter, in the 12 years that he makes his round around the Mazzaroth, is the 12 years of the sealing of the 144,000, each of the 12 constellations, one tribe. We are slow to understand. Therefore, we need years and tenths of years. Not to say the Adventist Church needed almost 2 centuries to understand what we understand. So we did that prayer. And first we did it as the people that were up there. And then we went to our laptops and we made communication with our forum members, with our worldwide community, and asked them. And then we had 2 reactions. Some said, okay, we do it. We asked Jesus not to come. And some said, you're imposters. You told us that Jesus would come. Now you do a trick. You ask for a prayer that he would not come. Come on. That stinks. And they went away. They went away. They showed us their backs. And so we were barely surviving in that time. We had no money anymore and we lost 50% of our congregation because of that prayer. They just went away. They did not believe anymore. But it was also prophesied that the ranks would be filled up. And this is what has happened since then. On the very same day, when we started the prayer, we got Moses, for example, as a new member. They said, this is a Christian behavior. Can you understand that this prayer was a sacrificial prayer? That we sacrificed something? Did we sacrifice something? What did we sacrifice? We believed Jesus would come and get us to heaven. And after us, the flood. But Jesus said, he's not come to destroy the earth, but to save the world. And the 144,000 were not visible. When you look back from today to the year 2016, do we have today more signs that Jesus would come? Or did we have in 2016 more signs that Jesus would come? In 2016, we had the High Sabbath prophecy ended and the Orion clock ended. But today we have thousands of more signs and countdowns to this year as we had before. But I want you to understand that we, from our whole heart, believe that Jesus would come. And we sacrificed that coming. And do you know what the worst thing on that was? And I remember that very well, as it would have been yesterday. I understood that Jesus would, as he is the number 7 in the Bible, completeness, he would give at least 7 more years. When you have studied 6 years, 7 years, since 2010 has passed 7 years of study as a group. And then all of a sudden the leader calls to a prayer for 7 more years. That's a hard sacrifice. These 7 years that we assumed were for us an eternity. It was a total and terrible and horrible eternity to prolong our wilderness wandering for another 7 years. If we would go now 7 years more, it would be 2032. Some of us would not be alive anymore here. Perhaps even I would not be alive anymore. 7 more years was a horrible sacrifice. And now, today, it's 10 years. Not 7 years. So, and now we see that it has been another 9 years, so to speak, 10 years after the HSL had ended. Today it's 9 years, no, because that was 16. And the HSL had ended in 2015. So since the HSL had ended, it's 10 years now. So I hope you really get it, why we wrote about that, a huge series about our spiritual experience in that time. And children were children at that time. So what we asked ourselves was then, in the same series in which we ended our old ministry, that predicted 2016 as the coming, we started a new ministry up there, still in the heat, on the laptops in the sun. We decided to open the White Cloud Farm ministry, and I registered these domains that we have today up there on the table, not here, not down in the house. We opened a new ministry, and the first task in this ministry was to explain our experience. We did that in a 3-part series. That was on the 22nd of November. As early as 2017, we tried to understand how much more time had been granted. In the same series, the last article of that series is called the 7 lean years, because we believe that it would be 7 years that we have been granted. And we tried now to put the HSL into the time frame either of 7 years or earlier, that we would have hoped that Jesus would come soon. We did not understand the 12 years of sealing. We did not understand many things. So we tried to compress the DNA. We said, okay, the people of God for whom we had prayed should replicate the DNA of Christ. The 144,000 should also get these doctrines and teachings through us and then replicate that in their belief system. So that would take time. But perhaps Jesus would abbreviate the time. Isn't there a verse in Matthew 24 that the time should be shortened? And again, we had hope that Jesus perhaps would come earlier. So there are 9 triplets, and 2 are a double triplet. Huh? So we said, let's take the white spaces out and compress all that, and then said, per triplet, Jesus will give half a year. Then you come to 3.5 years. And this is why we believe that Jesus would come in 2020. What did come instead? The coronavirus test. So we tried all the time to fiddle in the time that we experienced the HSL replicated. One time we took a half a year, then we did 9 years, then we did this and this and this and that. So the longest period that we could take to replicate in a time frame after the HSL has ended in 2015 was reaching to 2024, people. There is no other. There is no other. If the HSL itself was a prophecy of things to come and would include the judgment of the living, then we are off time. We are a year longer already. 2015 to 2025 is 10 years, not 9 years. That's a problem. That's a prophetical problem. Either we are totally wrong or we must find something that God intended that we did not see so far. So let's find the solution. Now, calculating the high Sabbaths onwards after 2015 would infringe the principle of the double stop codon that signals an absolute stop of the gene sequence. I did that here very roughly. I'll calculate it from the last triplet, the double stop, to 2025. Interestingly, 2025 has not one high Sabbath, not one. This is only 0. So that's the high Sabbaths. Sometimes I put even Paraguay high Sabbaths to the Paraguayan, half a year difference. No code similarity, nothing. Ray calculated it. Gerhard calculated it. They did not find any codon triplet or anything that would have to do with the HSL that we deciphered. No replication, nothing. Just white space. That's white. White space. We cannot say, oh, all of a sudden this appears again here. Then we would have proof. Jesus is coming. You know what I mean? But it would infringe the double stop codon. This is the end. Here we have the complete doctrine that Jesus wants you to believe. Nothing else. It must be replicated in a different form. And the time frame for the replication must be given in a different form. So, no results. What then would bring us to the underlying biblical principle, and the prophecy, the foreshadowing, that it would last exactly 10 years to have proof that he comes this year, after 2015, to reach the Jubilee this year, and the year of the second coming of Jesus. How did he do it? Silence. Now comes the new part. The awakening. The awakening of a guy. Hopefully soon the awakening of the church. In the night to Thursday, November 6th this year, a couple of days ago, this Thursday, I woke up once more to the voice of the Holy Spirit as I heard him audible in 2016 in the tent. Just freshly operated on the hip with a lot of hurts in the tent, I heard him. And I had a lot of hurts also in that night because of my training. The Spirit asked me a question. First one, then two. He asked me about the feasts that would comprise the High Sabbath list. No, that's easy, no? I did it. And I answered immediately, the feasts of God defined in the book of Leviticus, in the third book of Moses. Then the Spirit asked again, are those the only feasts in the Bible? No. Of course not, was John's next answer, my answer. The Spirit insisted again and said, tell me which ones you know and have in mind. I could say that easily. And then John knew where the 10 years came from and what had happened in those 10 years and what their end would be. And this is what I will show you now. I emphasize it's the Holy Spirit who leads into all truth. Therefore, I called this sermon the Forgotten Feasts. The High Sabbath list is only High Sabbath, as the name already says. But there are other feasts. While we never really forgot those feasts that John even could recite laying in bed, they never had been part of the HSL calculation.